Hey everybody, welcome back. Good to see you again. Anyway, we're pretty close to the end here, so I like to see I like the progression I've seen overall in the stories. That's great. I feel like maybe some people have actually regressed a little bit, just so I want to make sure that I mean, it's difficult when you have a class where that's all online and it's once a week, but it's really a matter of just really just kind of paying attention to these videos and following these instructions. I know I'm not perfect. If you have any kind of issues, I have office hours that are available pretty much, whenever you need to have them. Okay. Um, let's go to this. A couple of things I want to talk about, obviously, is a data journalism story. Um, and that to me was, just give me a second here. That to me was the ultimate lesson in following instructions. And of course, we'll talk about the feature assignment. Okay. Um, So most everybody pretty much got it. I think maybe I have a theory that this happened now 2 semesters in a row, where people almost like don't believe that I'm actually like asking them to write and follow a template, which, as you know, is you could just roll this right off of the as a Microsoft Word doc, but it's actually within the assignment entry itself. I had people who wrote weird things like the date when they wrote by. I mean, when I would buy, it's your byline. That's your name. Okay, so put that here. You fill in the blanks, how many times for, oh, sorry. I give away hints like that, by the way. I see people miss them. So, um, right here, basically some general reasons that are like right there on in the press releases. Like you can just use those, you can paraphrase those, whatever. Okay. Be a quote. And then, I had people I right here in the instructions, I said, do not go to this website, and people went to the website. I'm not sure why, but that's okay. Um, and they had and interestingly enough, um, the reason why I ask people not to do that because it's almost like hearsay in a court. Have you ever watched a court drama? It's not considered firsthand evidence. Yeah, you should really get information from. If you're gonna get it from a news source, you should get it from a reliable news source, like a university press release, or even like some of the ones I mentioned were like NJ.com, APP.com. These are the newspapers of our area. Azure Park Press, NJ.com, that sort of thing. Maybe even the New York Times has a story on tuition increases. I don't know, but but I had people went to this college tuition compare site and actually they got a number wrong. And so one thing you can't do is you get things wrong in a story. It's always better to be right than to be first. So I mean, I think it was particularly the one year, it was like 2021, 2022. I had people put in like a 3.84% increase. I was like, what? I mean, there's a press release for that. It's like a big black letters, that says what the tuition hike is. Okay. So right here it says, please follow the template. I really meant it actually. And this isn't unusual. This is not me like trying to like hold your hand like in like your first year of school or something like that. This is what news organizations do, not just for speed, but also for accuracy sakes and quality controls. They want them to write a certain way. And I called up this one site as an example. It's a very slow moving site, so I don't need to call up the story. It's also has a paywall, but Bloomberg, the business news sites do this. They some of these things like partnership stories, merger stories. Those stories are done like over and over and over again. So what they do is they actually give the reporter a template to follow from. And actually, another one, probably the most common thing they do is they report how much money they make or lost. And they do that on a quarterly basis, meaning every 3 months. Okay. That's all they do. They just pretty much report how much money they made or lost in that quarter. And that story is written the same way every time. So it's a matter of like maintaining control and as a matter of actually like making sure the reporters get it right and also you know, making sure the reporters do it as quickly as possible. They give them a template and they fill it out. And the template is just like this one right here. Okay. Um, sorry, that's the other one. So anyway, so yes, 500, 800 word story with a straight lead, framing your story's theme around what happened. Please follow the below template. Okay, it says it right there. Okay. Um, this and the story is about the trend. It's not about the student reaction. Okay. Student reaction goes later in the story. Okay. And then you need to like fill in the blanks. Rutgers tuition is raised how many times? General reasons. And then you could list it just right here, like this amount in this year, semicolon, this amount this year, semicolon. And then, again, I want you to highlight basically the year they did not raise tuition. It was 1 year. I'm just going to say that right now. And then the highest increase was almost very obvious. It should be right there. And, they cited, now this one, I mean, they actually, like I said, it was probably the biggest event on campus. I realize a lot of you aren't on campus or haven't even seen the campus. But I mean, all you need to do is actually just go through Google and you'll see it. It's like there was a big event last year that happened on campus that that actually, when I say event, it was actually a thing. It was actually part of the contract negotiations, that sort of thing. And it led to one of the biggest increases, I think, in 20 years or longer. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's all right there. Okay. And then I give you the years. I had once again, I warned. I thought maybe somebody would go outside the lines. I had somebody who reported a tuition hike from 2016. That's not within the last 5 years. Okay. All right. So, um, probably the most common issue I had actually with this was, I can call this up, was the bottom section where I can understand where maybe there was some confusion here because I'm a big believer in not having big quotes. I don't like having long quotes. I feel you can write them, okay, and it'd be much more in a much more engaging way than the way they're said. So maybe you got confused by the first part, which actually does have like big long quotes from like the administration. Well, that's different. Okay. That's like their kind of official statement. You can even like cut down those quotes because they are long. Like this one from President Jonathan Holloway. Um, this is the section where we're going to give their administrators their say and give them the chance to basically talk about like what they have, why they're doing what they're doing. And that's their official statement. But the bottom part where the students talks, that should be more engaging. They should be more relatable. Okay. This should be like the crime reaction story. Okay. Amanda Henry, Rutgers transfer student, initially thought it'd be a good option because of its price, the Rutgers. As tuition continues to increase, she began to realize that it's no longer a selling point anymore. I mean, even these sentences are kind of a little bit long, but at least there is some anecdotal stuff here, like stories in the larger story. This guy says that even parking prices are going up because the addition of more solar powers does not correlate to what he wants out of students, or to the wants and needs of students. Okay. Um, this person blamed the strike. Um, this sort of thing. So yeah, I mean that's what I want on the bottom is actually to write out these anecdotes, not just to rely on the long quote. I mean, the early part we can quote Jonathan Holloway till the cows come home, but that's fine. Okay. But bottom part, I want it to be engaging, something relatable that people can, it's supposed to balance out the story. It's supposed to provide the students some sort of a voice that connects with people because the administration may have like a million reasons for why they're going to raise tuition. They may make sense, but students want to have, they should allow their platform too and have an opinion. That comes down to the bottom. It's not the main focus of the story. You have to remember that. It's not the main focus of the story. Okay. Some people decided to go right around a template and change what they had altogether. So so yeah. All right. So that rewrite is due on Monday. Okay, don't forget that. We don't have much that's left that's due. We have our feature assignment that's due a week from Monday. Okay, I'm giving you guys 2 weeks on that. And then of course there'll be a rewrite after that. That'll be due the April 15th. So that'll be due in 2 weeks from now. I'll post that next week. So again, we're doing a 500, 800 word story on this, the weather, okay? And wherever you are, write about it. I don't, if you're in Asia or if you're in the United States, whatever, doesn't matter to me, just write about it. Try to get some opinions on it. If you don't have a lot of students around, that's fine, but I do have a discussion point that's posted, and actually, let's check to see how that's doing, which I meant to do. Remember that this is actually class participation, and I was, oh, there we go. How do you feel about the tuition hike? So people came around on that one. That's good. And I do have this. There are people who have contributed. That's good. But I am actually looking at this make sure people are actually like coming through on this. And don't forget, that tuition hike one is still up, so you can look at that for if you need to rewrite the bottom part of the student section for the data journalism assignment. But this is for the this is for the this is for the feature assignment, the weather. Okay. Thank you, Ricky. I feel that the weather at Rutgers fluctuates, especially. I mean, if you're in another country, that sort of thing, you also can write about the Rutgers weather. All you need to do is look at, you know, you all you need to do is look at the reactions that are from the students. It looks like we have some decent ones here. Just last week, it seemed as though it's getting warmer out, especially with the sun shifting. And the whole idea here is that the weather shifts up and down constantly, and it creates like, changes to routines. Like, again, some of the most important decisions you make all day is like maybe like the clothes you wear. Especially if you have to travel around someplace and walk around, you can't be sitting still. You need to have something that's accessible to you, or not. You need, or if you maybe if you bring too much clothing, it's like it becomes a burden, 'cause especially if it gets hot. And then you see the people like maybe tie their sweaters around their waists or their jackets or whatever. Um, she says I severely regretted leaving my coat behind this one particular day when it was raining and everything, because the quick turnaround made even walking to my car miserable. That's great anecdotal stuff. Good job, Ricky. Okay. So the main realization I've had about Rutgers weather is that you need to be prepared daily high, blah, blah, blah. So that's good. Okay. There's a person who says, no AC. There's a particular dorm on campus where there's like, it gets like particularly hot. That's, well, look at this one. Thank you, Jason. It's very long. That's great, actually. Thank you. But again, please, no long quotes. I want to see anecdotes. I want to see like people actually take what's being said there and mostly write it and interpret it in a way that actually is more readable than how it's presented right now. Okay. What you can do is you can take that quote, remove the quotation marks, and just basically write it in third person. Ricky Williams said that, sorry, I don't know why I look at this. I'm gonna get the Mets one. Sorry, big Mets fan here. Sorry about that. Ricky Williams said that like she's basically sick of the weather, the going up and down. There was one particular day where, you know, she thought it was going to be nice, and then it turned out to be miserable with dark clouds and cold weather and rain, and she regretted leaving her coat behind. Okay. Um, so yeah, there you go. That's essentially a paraphrase anecdote right there, where you basically used your words to describe what they're saying. Okay. And the reason why I say that is because I had some people actually like ask me, actually, what is actually paraphrasing? And I have 3 classes, so I have to make sure that you know what that means. Okay. And actually, I have a video that'll help demonstrate that. Okay. I'm going to show later on. Okay, so let's see here. So yeah, don't forget, I got 6 so far. Let's get more people to contribute to this, please. Okay. And all right. So, and like I said, that video is like right here, but I'm actually going to show it as part of this as part of this lecture, because I want to make sure people see it. Okay. How I basically take how I can take essentially those discussion point quotes and turn them into a story. A good paraphrase story, mostly paraphrase, where I'm using my words to describe people's experiences mostly. And then you have direct quotes that are used for the emotional remarks or the colorful remarks or that sort of thing. Okay. Like we talked about with the crime reaction story, like we just talked about with the tuition hike story. Okay. We want to basically have people use their writing to describe what people are doing and how they're feeling and what they're saying. Okay. All right. And yeah, that's the rewrite for the data journalism. I'm sorry, it's over here now. All right, so let's just go to the get rid of this right now. Let's go to the book for a little bit, which kind of expands on it. And actually, before we get to the book, I wanted to show this. This is a big event of the past week. Unfortunately, it was a terrible thing to happen. And we at the time, I actually talked about it in my in-person classes, and I was like, oh my God. And I thought we thought maybe we had untold numbers of people, and you don't want any lives lost, but it was pretty amazing to hear that they actually stopped traffic beforehand. What a relief. This was the incident in Baltimore in the United States here in Maryland, where a tanker ship crashed into the Francis Scott Key Bridge and it fell. As you can see here, this is all they had in the morning. We had no idea what was going on at the time. So there's really no sound, as you can see. Um, and then it crashed into the bridge. What a horrific sight that was. And this is yeah, there it goes. So you write that story, you break that news, you get that story out there. It's horrible news. You want people to know about it. You update that news. You find out, like, I think the death toll at this point is still at 6. It's terrible, but still. But again, a story like this goes on, and one way it lives on is through the feature stories. Okay, the feature stories are actually like when you take like maybe like an anecdote from that particular story, like somebody who saved somebody's life. Maybe in that particular case, one person who maybe like just made it over the bridge and missed and like essentially like is relieved that they were, they didn't go into the water. Um, oh brother. Um, I'm sorry. Um, you have I'm just actually just see Baltimore investigation turns to ship. You see the follow-ups turns to ship's deadly mechanical failure. Okay. Um, if you call up this story, sometimes you'll see like stories that are actually like with links that go with the main story. This is like a story that's basically updating the main story, basically going into like how it happened, how the ship apparently failed. Okay. And you see it's a very long story. And what you'll see is actually, like I said, you'll see like maybe like some stories that actually will go with that story. I'm actually not really seeing it right now, but let me just maybe sometimes they show it like halfway through. Sometimes I have to admit I'm kind of a little bit of a random thinker and teacher a little bit. I probably should have like called this up earlier. I apologize for that. I actually like was making my tape before, and I was tripping over my words so often that I just actually just scrapped it and started over again. So, um, okay. I mean, you got links within the story that might actually report to like, might be like sidebar stories that basically point to like specific things that happened within the case. You'll see right there, complete blackout. What does that go to? The vessel had a complete blackout. Okay. So let's actually see, first of all, if there's anything here. Maritime industry reported, I'm sorry. There's some horrible pictures there. Okay. Well, usually there's something on the bottom. I don't see anything right there. So, but actually, let me click on this one right here. Okay, it's the one that talks about. Sometimes it's not necessarily like a personal story. Maybe it's like they break out one specific thing about the whole calamity that happened, and they give it a little more focused. So let's look at this one right here. It says complete blackout. Um, and wait for my computer, which was built 10 years ago, to move in a very slow pace. Um, it's kind of much like, it reminds me again like about the Exxon Valdez, but I mean, again, I'm not talking about driver error here necessarily, but or captain error or anything like that. But there we go. Okay, so this actually there. Okay, so this is essentially a sidebar story. A few minutes before the cargo ship Dali crashed at the Francis Scott Key Bridge, the vessel had a complete blackout that knocked over out power. So this is essentially like, I mean, it's not really a feature story, but it takes out like one piece of the larger story and like puts a spotlight on it. And you'll see like, if you like Google here, Baltimore ship, maybe something along the lines of like personal story or something like that. Maybe you'll see like one person's experience being told. And this is again where the feature story can like expand out and really kind of like put a spotlight on like the effect, the impact it has on it. Um, I guess maybe it's a little bit too early in the timeline of events here to actually like really like, oh, brother. Okay, no, not that. Okay, sorry about that. This is the problem I was having before. Let's go to more news, maybe. You'll see like stories that'll say like what to know, a timeline of things that have happened. Um, let me see here. Cargo ship, 6 workers. Wow, shipping. Here's a first person story. That basically goes on, talks about like their personal experiences and like how trying to avoid these types of things from happening. Um, just lots of like stuff that actually like is basically coming out basically. And here's a story about who's Francis Scott Key. His poem became the Star Spangled Banner. He was actually the national anthem, the author of the national anthem, a songwriter essentially. Okay. Um, okay. No words. Baltimore Bridge tragedy brings back one family's grief. So here's a basically essentially a human interest sidebar story that's probably has like some sort of feature-ish angle to it. And when you don't have like you don't have a lot of information about the people who have been directly impacted, maybe one of the things you do is you try to find out try to see if there's other people who maybe can relate to this, or maybe like have gone through similar experiences. That's one way to look at essentially like the way to like kind of break this down into the story into smaller parts, or even to smaller stories. Michael DiMaggio's nephew told him the news of the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse and the pain of losing his sister last year came flooding back. So this is a feature story. It basically gives you this kind of tease, as I talked about last week, that essentially like doesn't tell you everything you need to know, but it gives you some sort of suspense, full kind of like dramatic kind of like introduction to the story, where it brings you one step at a time. Okay, we wish nobody else would have to feel like we do, said DiMaggio at 38 of Annapolis. It's heartbreaking. From many family members of the nation's highway workers, it's grief that repeatedly plays out against a deadly landscape that sees laborers killed or severely injured amid dangerous job sites, negligent drivers, or unpredictable catastrophes. Just 3 months ago. So this is actually a story about essentially like this is just yet another. There were construction workers on a bridge, and actually this is something I write a lot about. We deal a lot of with on insurance industry, is people who actually lose their lives or get hurt on the job or lose their lives, unfortunately, and there's actually insurance for that and everything. And so what this story is taking a piece of the larger story about the disaster and the death toll and everything, and who was the victim of that, and breaking it out into like another story, basically looking at essentially, um, how this is actually just another example of how construction workers have unsafe jobs, and you should know about that. And what's going to do is going to write it in a way, it's actually present it itself in a way that's as what they call is considered essentially a timeless lead. It's a story that doesn't have necessarily a time element on it. It's a timeless story. Okay. And what you have essentially is of kind of a slower way, a more suspenseful way of entering that story of one person's personal experience. And that's what I want you to do with these weather stories, is really to start with one person, not 5 people, not 10 people's experience, one person at a time, and show what went on with them. Okay. Michael DiMaggio's nephew. And then what it does is it comes to a nut graph that essentially like gives you the overall what happened, how this is bridge collapse just brought back reminders of all the different other construction tragedies that happen throughout the United States all the time, every year, every day, every month. Okay. All right. So that's what you need to look at there. Okay. And like I said, there is some stuff in the book that talks about that. When you go back here to the book, we just have to wait a little bit longer here. Okay. All right, finding a story ideas. Everything has a story behind it. Journalists just open their eyes and ears to find an interesting theme. Writers find ideas by being curious and observe about life. They just ask questions, listen to topics. So they also find stories that spin off news topics. And that was the example here with the family that was reminded the Baltimore tragedy reminded them of their own personal construction tragedy. A story on the number of dog adoptions in the area may prompt a sidebar on the journey of a prompt. Particularly, this is by the way the chapter 12, the feature story chapter. Okay. Might prompt a spy sidebar on the journey of a particular pet finding a forever home. Speaking of which, there's one doggy right there that found a forever home. Hey, Bruiser. A report on the nation's receding coastline may generate stories about the plight of families whose homesteads are now covered underwater. It takes the practice to see story ideas everywhere and in everything. Sometimes beginning journalists have trouble finding ideas. The concept of universal needs might help. It is a method that journalists sometimes use to find stories that attract large audiences, which is a major news value. Okay. Universal needs are those, and that's what we're doing here with essentially the weather story, the universal needs. They look for things that affect food, clothing, shelter, love, health, approval. I mean, weather could fall into some of those at least. Self-esteem, the way you dress, that sort of thing. Job satisfaction, school, learning, that sort of thing. Okay. What they're talking about here actually is they talk about how like the COVID pandemic spurred off a lot of different like stories just like that. Learning, Instacart, learning how to order deliveries remotely. I had to like help my dad with that. He was 88 years old. He didn't know how to do it. The effect on first responders, homeschooling grandchildren, taking care of grandchildren, juggling work, the vaccine issues, all that stuff, the COVID pandemic basically like spun off those types of stories, those types of personal stories. Okay. um Again, like gathering the information, some of that, I mean, it's like it's about the spoken word, as we've talked about with the discussion point, but it's also a matter of like observations, seeing, listening, smelling, touching. I mean, some of that gets incorporated in these types of stories too. When you have a situation where you have a you know, somebody who's actually like dealing with like leaving their coat behind because of the gray skies, you write about and the bad weather. You write about, instead not just the bad weather, but how the skies are gray and that sort of thing, and how that might affect people's moods. So you add a little more description like that. Okay. Um, the only requirement for the lead of the feature story is that it interests people, making them want to stay with the story and learn more. The story can start with either a summary lead, well, really not in this case, an alternative lead. Okay. Basically something that kind of essentially like leads the reader in a more engaging way. Okay. So speaking of which, I want to show you a video. Okay. That again, it's actually contained within. I don't have much actually more to say, but I'd like you to watch this video. And this will actually help, I hope, you understand like basically what it takes to basically like build one of these stories from scratch. And I show this by taking the discussion points that I had for a past feature story and built it into a story, and I built the story using an anecdotal lead and using anecdotes to actually fill out the body of the story. Okay. Now my talking in this, by the way, I notice now is pretty up and down, and I apologize for that. I hope that maybe someday do a better one, do a new one, but I haven't done that yet. But so I apologize for the way I'm speaking this. I'm not really speaking very well in this. Okay. You just basically take. All right, let me just start from the top. Okay, there we go. I mean, basically, if you really want like a big hint about how to handle things here, you could just basically take like, I don't know, like I said, I haven't read through all these yet. Okay. But you just take like, let's just take three. Like Kaylee, Cameron, and Joseph. Do a little copy here. Okay. And it's like size, so it's not too much you can face. Okay. No, actually, I'm sorry. Do it right here. Let's do 16. Okay. So maybe we do like a little bit of paste special, cut, paste. Okay. All right. So this was Cameron, Kaylee. Copy down the first name here. I'm sorry. And that's Joseph Zarrell. All right. So that's the time where you tell me everything's gonna be okay. Everything's gonna be okay. Oh God. Sorry, buddy. So anyway, this is what I do actually a lot now, because actually like a lot of the interviews I do actually I get a transcript for. So I literally will just cut and paste right from it. Just like you do with those news releases, you just cut and paste from it. And then you can kind of shape it so that it actually is your writing. Shape it in your writing and also fit it within the context of your story. Use transitional phrases to kind of go from one paragraph to the next or one point to the next. Okay. All right. So we can do something like this. Joseph Zarrell, Joe, I forget what year you're in, but just say like maybe Rutgers. Said the weather as of late has been pretty ridiculous. Some days it's waking up the 70 to 80, 70, 60 to 70 degree weather and wearing shorts and t-shirt. Thanks to you. The next day, again, well, I'm actually paraphrasing here because I can actually cut what he's saying without getting too wordy, and make it easier to read. Okay, and people tend to read paraphrasing and storytelling narrative more than read quotes. Okay, weather is so interesting, especially now because of how random it is. One day it could be beautiful, next day it could just be disgusting and muggy. Which sounds like a pretty good quote. Okay? So that's probably like one anecdote or one quote right there. Okay, all right. Then we got Cameron. Hope I spell your name right. Well, it's right there. Let's see here. Cameron Giallo, on the other hand, said she really enjoys the weather. Sorry. You could do like a partial quote. Maybe even gets to experience going on. Maybe, we only experienced cold or hot weather instead of both. I think we would get sick of the constant higher temperatures. Yeah. That. Right. Got Kaylee Warden down here. Kaylee, sorry if I forgot her name. I know it's just in front of me. Kaylee Warden said she has been loving the weather this past week. As Rutgers is experiencing, has been, she said this is her favorite time of year because you start to see everyone going outside more. And then, like I said, by paraphrase, you can actually cut down on things that don't sound so repetitive. The changing weather, she has been going out in the sun to do more work or simply bask in the sun. However, I know that the temperature will be going back down soon, and that is concerning because of global warming. Just do that. All right. So there you go. Now I've just given you essentially like how now we can stick transitions in between those anecdotes and those quotes. I gave you just 3 of them right there. That's how simple it can be. And then, basically there's also a little bit more description in this kind of story. I can actually you try a little bit harder to try to paint a picture of what everybody's going through. Basically we get to see what Joe is wearing, that sort of thing. Get a little bit, you maybe ask those sorts of questions you're interviewing, or actually you make that observation in your notes you wouldn't otherwise make. Like, what are they wearing? How are they acting? What's the expression on their face? That's what kind of thing you do in a feature. Okay. Now, here's again the big difference. Okay, so maybe I add in a transition right here. Add in a transition right here. Then I add in a transition right here. Okay. All right. But we have to come up with a theme for the story, kind of like liking the hot weather, but not liking the mixed situation so much. Okay. So, you try to think of maybe what would be a lead for this story. Okay. So Rutgers students, we say they've been frustrated with the gloomy weather recently, but they're pleased that the weather has at least gotten warmer. I know it doesn't sound like earth-shattering news, but again, it's supposed to be an engaging story, a light story. People like to kind of like light features sometimes just because it's something relatable, you know, like I talked about with the clothing and stuff like that. Okay, now here's the big difference. That's like, see, I wrote that like a lead, right? Only the big difference here is that's not going to be your lead. That's going to be your nut graph. This is how you can actually like construct this feature story, so that actually you can kind of envision what would be look like more as a straight news story, and kind of develop it into a nut graph. What you can do is you're going to take one of these anecdotes, maybe from here, okay, and you're going to. I would take maybe Kaylee's actually. That seemed to kind of like.
Nickelodeon was
All right, buddy.
Chapters.
Echo the whole sentiment I just expressed there. Basically sum up the news, the notes you got, which are right there in discussion points, and you put it at the top. And now you have an anecdotal lead. We can always return to Kaylee. We don't have to actually like, you know, leave her high and dry. A lot of times actually what they do in these feature stories, they start off with a person and then they end with the same person. But by starting off with Kaylee, we can actually drill down to maybe her personal frustrations or pleasantries or whatever that more specific to her, and we can drill down and get more detail. Okay, so that's all. See what I did there? I just moved essentially one anecdote to the top. So now it starts with Kaylee Warden said she's been loving the weather this past week. Rutgers been experiencing 70s and reaching the mid-80s. She said this is her favorite time of year because you start to see everyone going outside. With this change in weather, she has been going outside and doing more schoolwork, to read, or to simply bask in the sun. Nice. I like the idea of basking in the sun. That's good writing right there. It's good. Like Kaylee actually provided essentially, but but that was actually a good quote she had there. Essentially, that we turn into a paraphrase. Hopefully, but then we get into the however. However, I know that temperature is going to go going back down soon, and that is concerning in regards to global warming. Okay, and the nut graph. Okay, people are kind of looking for like something here to basically give me at this point to give me an idea, because it is a feature story, but it's also a news story at the same time. So they are looking for news. Okay, but they're hopefully by this point they're kind of hooked in by the stylistic writing and the engaging story, the basking in the sun, the sense of being there, the sense of feeling. Rutgers should say they've been frustrated by the gloomy side, with the gloomy weather recently, but they're pleased that the weather has at least gotten warm. Okay. Maybe like some students say it's nice to have a consistent idea what they're wearing. It's kind of what Joe got into. See, blah blah blah. Or you could say like, or even like it's frustrating not knowing what to wear or whatever. Right? That's it. Right? Oops, sorry. Okay, sorry about that, everybody. Coming back. Okay, so I hope what you got from that at least is like, again, some idea. I know, again, I know it was moving a little faster and that sort of thing, but the idea was like just basically you can almost just like write the story just basically like from the discussion point. We already got like 6 people have commented, and you probably only need like 3 or 4 people for the story. So there you go, right there. I do have an example of a story that works, so you can use that. That's actually embedded into the assignment entry too. Okay. Don't forget also that you have a major assignment that's due by the end of the month. Okay, so we'll talk more about that in the coming weeks, and also how to handle that. I actually have a video for that too. So, all right. Again, you have any kind of issues or anything like that, let me know. We can schedule office hours, the whole thing. Thanks very much, and I will be talking to you.